we found JB's character, you know.
That's right, we
found him.
He's kind of hard to
did.
miss. He's enormous.
There's an interesting question in the chat about what VO actors and actresses do when they're working and having moments when they're just not feeling it, for lack of a better terminology. That's
Oh yeah, I would love to hear that.
So how do you guys cope with that when it's just not coming for you?
I say I'm taking the day off and I leave.
Yeah, we don't get to do that.
I go to service. Yeah, Sissy, what were you gonna say?
I'll usually ask to take a 10-minute break and then go find whether it's music that I need to get me into it, or you know, if it's been a vocally stressful session, I'll do some straw phonations to like reset my throat. You were asking earlier, Buffpup, about like tricks that we have for you know, certain things. Straw phonations, man. If you have not looked into that, like Mindy Pack, who is Yes, Mindy Pack is a vocal coach to like the stars, but she also does. She also works with voice actors, and she's created this thing called the voice straw. They're metal straws, reusable, obviously. That you can do a series of exercises in that can reset your vocal cords. So this is gonna get real technical here for a hot second, but when we speak, your vocal cords in the back of your throat kind of move in an oscillation like this, right? And if you scream, like if you do a very loud effort, which we talked about earlier, they can get offset and they look like this. And so when they try to move and vibrate to make the sound, they're hitting in the wrong spot. And so that's when you can get damage and nodes and bruising and all kinds of stuff that can really damage your voice, which for those of us that make a living using our voice, that's really scary stuff. So the voice straw, what they do is you have a series of sounds that you make through the straw, and if you're pushing air out, it's also forcing air back down because it's such a narrow straw, and so it can reset. I'm trying to make sure I have the right angle here. Can reset your cords to the right place with the air that comes back down, and so you're back to equilibrium. So I've had sessions where I've left like literally with my throat bleeding. And had to work with Mindy to get back to good and make sure that I don't have permanent damage in my throat. But being able to do that in the middle of a session and just be like, I'm going to need 10 minutes. I'm going to go do my warm-ups again. You know, I'll do them on my way there and then take a break, go reset, and then come back. It's absolutely saved me. So I love the voice straw.
I've never heard of that ever.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
There's the physical side of it, and you know, about damage, but there's also, you know, the emotional acting side of it, where you know you can get into a place where you like. Sometimes, you know, it's interesting directing now, because I kind of ban producers from talking about what they don't want, and they do that quite a lot. Well, we don't want this, we don't want that, we don't want. Well, that gives an actor nothing. You got to talk about what you do want. And so I having been in the booth as much as I have, I hope I'm really empathic and sympathetic to actors and their plight. And there's usually something we can do to help them if they're not feeling it. And that can be, go take a walk around the block, you know, take a break. Let's us have a meeting, the team, to sort of get more clear about what exactly we're looking for. And then as an actor, I think going back to really listening carefully, especially if you're working with other people, and getting back to your technique. That's why training is so important, is relying on the technical to get you out of trouble when you are in trouble, when you're not feeling the role exactly. And also, I think we're all full of huge self-doubt. I think there's a misconception about actors that they are naturally confident people, that because they know how to use words very well and they know how to speak, that they are inherently confident.
He's giving away all our secrets.
It's not necessarily true.
Okay, it's
well,
I
tell this a lot. I mean, I'm perfectly honest about it. I became an actor because I didn't want to be me. I had a really shitty childhood. I had a really difficult time. I was bullied the hell out of, but I could leap into other people's lives and be something else, and not be the victim, and not be the guy who was getting trodden down. And so ask me to read at your wedding, I'll probably fall to pieces, but ask me to do anything as a character, I'm fine, because it's not me. I don't think of it as me. There are bits of me in it, but I think being able to take that full leap, it actually takes humility and empathy to be an actor, because you can't step into someone else's shoes with your own ego going on. You have to kind of let that go to really accept who someone else is and be them. And I think it's just something that's often misunderstood about what we do, I think.
Yeah,
I think
talking about that. When I went to Poland, when I talked to the guy, I'm so sorry, I don't remember his name, but when I talked to the guy who did the altars, I think there's 70 different iterations of him, because it's all him talking to himself in different lifetimes throughout the entire game. And I remember asking that question where I was like, hey, how do you go from one character who is super sad, lost his wife, to a character that's like his life is so good and happy, and like how do you do that? Because he was talking about how he would have to change his character 4 or 5 times a day to kind of keep up with the timeline of what he was making. And there's times where he said that he was like so disheveled and he had to go home and like take a weekend off because like a lot of things were just so heavy. But his team worked so hard with him to make sure that every character that he did felt the way that it was supposed to, because of all the breaks that he was allowed and all the time that he was to have allocated to himself to reset himself because of such heavy different implications of the same character.
Well,
And I thought that was really interesting.
That brings to mind a couple of pieces of this too. Is we're not doing this alone. You know, we're in there with the voice director, we're in there with the writers and the producers, and I'm pulling on the energy of all those people as I feed, you know, whatever I have to bring to this. And I think, you know, especially in the modern times we live in, there are days when, just like anybody else at work, we can show up and go, oh my God, I just don't have it today. I'm fried. Something happened with my house or my kid or my life. And in those moments, I drop into service. I drop into, look, these writers and this team have busted their backside and just their hearts and souls for months and years. And if I can show up just for them, I can show up to serve them to the absolute best of my ability times 10 if I can bring it. And that gets me out of myself. And then I'm in the energy flow. And
that's the job as well. It's my job as a director. It's not my project. It's their project. I'm there to serve their project. And I say to this, if I'm being interviewed for a gig for something, I'm like, I'm here to serve what you do. When I first walked I went to a very fancy London drama school. And when you first walk through the doors, they're like, okay, if you want to be famous, there's the door. See you later. But understand who you are. You are a vessel for a writer.
Yep. Yes.
And that's kind of it. And you know, all the accolades you get as an actor, hopefully, if you're doing something right, a lot of them I would always dedicate to writers, because without that, you're nothing. You're only as good as the roadmap. I was doing there was a voiceover conference, and there were a bunch of coaches who were teaching workshops through this voiceover conference. And it was kind of a big deal. We're at this fancy hotel down in LA, and each coach had to get up and talk a bit about their workshop. And the guy before me, who I respected enormously and knew for a while, got up and said, here's the thing, it's not really about the words. People get very hung up about the words, and you've got to kind of forget about that and just get. And I was like, oh shit, I'm about to go up and say the exact opposite of what he's just said. Because it's all about the words, because that's your Sherlock Holmes, and that's your treasure map. You're digging out the gold from that to find out what's going on. And the biggest sin I see committed is people not understanding how to interpret text. It's not their fault, they just never been taught.
Yes.
But I had that very classical education, and by God, I tell you, it's most valuable. I don't care how many technical exercises you do as a voice, or how many dialects you can do, or whatever the hell else. That has been the most important thing I've ever learned about this. Studying Shakespeare, studying classics, studying text and how it works, why we have the rules of writing that we do have. You need that as an actor, because you got to find those signals. That's what will get you the job every time. Because if you're not doing that, you're sort of saying, I'm a better writer than the writer. And if you're just kind of loosely putting your interpretation on it without any kind of evidential-based decision-making, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah. Writers are everything. I always say writers should be the celebrities. Writers make the world go round. Without writers, we have nothing to do, you know, and we're channeling pieces of the divine human experience. And there I go again with the divine thing, but it's true, you know. I go back.
Burn
me, baby. I dare you to try to burn me. I put that mirror stuff on you and you go,
should I bring up my altar in the background here?
Right, girl? Mine's right out there. Girl,
this is JB Bond signing off. I'll be now represented by an avatar.
Pulls up Funko. Oh no.
No, but
that's
it goes back to that Joseph Campbell thing, right? Joseph
Mhm.
Campbell, for those of you who don't know, was a professor of mythology, and he started studying storytelling around the world in all kinds of
Genius.
cultures. Genius. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I have understood this to be true. Star Wars was a great movie. It was not always a brilliant endeavor in every technical front. And I think a part of why it was so enduring is that it was innovative, it was daring, it was bold and amazing. It was also written George sat down with Joseph Campbell and structured a story that echoes the myths we tell ourselves around this planet. We only have so many stories we tell over and over again. This is what Campbell came up with. He analyzed all this stuff before computers, for God's sake.